the 4th of October. My goodness. 2022. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And this is the Nuclear Scumbag Show for obvious reasons. You can also call 709-589-4406 or text it. Or not. There's lots and lots and lots to get through tonight. We got a nice poll for everybody tonight. We're going to start off with the poll, obviously. And the poll is coming right at us. Is Chernobyl a single reactor worse than Fukushima's 4 nuclear meltdowns and 8 fuel pools that melted down? And of course, the fuel pools have much more than the reactors. They are reactor cores. We'll run you through all of that. It's Nobel Peace Prize time again. Marie Curie won it twice. She lost both of her hands. I'd rather have my 2 hands than a Nobel Prize. I don't know about you, but then her work created the demonic, sadistic United Nations puppet machine. So when you look at what have I got down there? Chernobyl to your left, and the remains of Fukushima's number 4 reactor. Officially, this is hard to wrap your mind around. Chernobyl, according to every single media on the entire planet, bar nothing, Netflix, Hollywood, you name it, have repeatedly asserted that Chernobyl is worse than Fukushima. So it's it's impossible to trust the nuclear industry when they make those kind of assertions. And Chernobyl was brutal. Fukushima had a massive earthquake. Chernobyl never. Chernobyl was far away from the ocean, 600 miles. Japan is right on the ocean, and the tsunami hit it at 700 kilometers per hour. It's 680 kilometers of the coastline. The numbers in the red are people that are confirmed dead, and in the yellow were missing at that time. The plant had multiple detonations, and these are the heat signatures of the 4 buildings, not like Chernobyl, a single one. Multiple meltdowns confirmed. I'll play a little clip of the tsunami original broadcast.
The Japanese Prime Minister appeared on TV to put into play a plan they'd rehearsed for years.
We will secure the safety of the people of Japan, and in order to minimize the damage, the government will make every effort possible. And we ask the people of Japan to continue to be cautious and vigilant and keep tuned in to the reports on the television and radio. And we ask the people of Japan to act calmly.
They panicked, obviously. Prime Minister. So, to your left are the nuclear plants in Japan. And to your right is a model of the people that died because That's what 680 kilometers of the coastline looked like. There was no infrastructure left to protect those plants. And so they buried it, they covered it up. Just quickly get through this. We'll get into the news. We're going to skim through yesterday's news and bang into today's news right away. Highest ever radiation levels detected outside the reactor buildings. People exposed to it would die in 20 minutes. They're talking about the stacks, the skinny stacks. Are lethal doses at around 25 sieverts by the base of them. That's still that way today. So imagine how radioactive the actual reactor sites are. A video believed to show parts of the internal structure in Fukushima number 1. Containment vessel was scattered around, the containment vessel. And that 3-inch thick lead plates had disappeared. Because you can see down through the buildings, see? And they've done that with drones. The IAEA was informed in March that the number 1 reactor core started melting down about 50 minutes after the cooling stopped. And it was a melted pile. Of course, it doesn't just turn into a melted pile. There has to be neutrons, or there has to be control rods that are going to stop it from continuing to melt. Once it starts melting down, you can throw control rods on it. They're going to atomize an aerosol. It's going to burn at incredible temperatures. I'm just saying you need to take stuff like that into consideration. 225 sieverts per hour at reactor 1. Actually, up to 1 million sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. So what is 1 million sieverts? It's a lethal dose from very far away. Reactor 2. This headline was puzzling because Reactor 4 and Reactor 3 were just stumps left. But Reactor 2 still kind of looked like it was intact. But I'm going to show you some of the documentation. So despite the fact that it looks like it's intact, they said if the reactor could be destroyed, Reactor 2, it would make Tokyo uninhabitable. Tokyo would become uninhabitable. Which is exact same reactors as Reactor 4, which is completely gone, and Reactor 3, which is completely gone. Did I get it all? Over half the fuel melted at Reactor 2 and 3, says TEPCO. Assume the worst scenario. When you look at the actual documentation, number 2 was the liquefied uranium core. We've never seen that in history. We've never seen multiple buildings melt down at one time in history. We've never. This is the claim that Chernobyl is worse than this is pure desperation, and it's sedition against the planet. The smoke is black, murmured the Prime Minister Khan after Reactor 3 exploded. 3 was the mixed oxide fuel. They felt the explosion 25 miles away. 25 miles away. Military units severely contaminated when number 3 exploded. Too radioactive to stand next to each other. That's a death sentence. Curium and plutonium outside of the plant indicates a nuclear explosion at number 3. Broken, spent nuclear fuel rods may have been scattered, and of course,
radioactive contaminants.
We fixed that. That's not supposed to be there. So that's Reactor 3 detonating. Let's do that again. What's the chance that that's not the fuel pool in the reactor core rising up and falling down, Dana? Oh, 0. Explosion at Fukushima Unit 3 drove the nuclear fuel out of the storage pool and scattered it up to 2 miles away. I don't know. They felt it 25 miles away. And all that's left of it is a stump. Number 3. The fuel pools with decades of reactor cores are at the very top. The very top. These are 190-foot high buildings, 150 feet wide. These are 19-story apartment buildings sizes, very big buildings. The walls, Unit 4 collapsed. Spent fuel pool. There is no water in there. Again, my apologies. I meant because we're redoing the whole archive. Some of that stuff slips past me. This is, as you can see over there, there's no guts left in the building. If you owned a 190-foot building and you were on vacation and they sent you a picture and this is what it looked like, would you say, get some paint on it and get it back up and running? Does that look like a 190-foot building to anybody? That's the bottom of the reactor core. That's the top of the reactor core. That's the lid. And they should be up here where my finger is to. You see the debris hanging out of the bottom of it? And these holes, rather. These pillars, just the pillars you're looking at there, you can put a SUV on that and turn it around. That's how big those pillars are. There's pillars forever. Explosion heard near heavily damaged number 4. Number 4, fuel pool boiled dry in the fire. And the fuel pools would be, there's 2 of them because you don't have a repository. They were both stuffed. Coming along a bit better tonight. Trying to avoid the Buckleys here. I'll just bear with me. Oh well, might as well take some Buckleys. It probably won't work at this stage, but woo! That's some nasty stuff, that Buckleys, man. Unit 4 had major impulse sound and damage to the roof on March the 14th. Fire was seen hours later and again the next day. Flames sighted deep within Unit 4 with second fire in 24 hours. So officially they claim it looks like this. They tore it down until there was nothing left.
Can you tell the difference? I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference?
I can't tell the difference. It looks perfectly normal to me. Let's ask CNN. CNN, how does it look at Reactor 4?
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
To the world's worst nuclear disaster. There was many media that decided to go on TV and tell people they're in a pool that don't exist because they were bored, maybe. I don't know.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4. At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,800 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Whenever Seth Dorn says it was like a chest x-ray, I always laugh. Looks like we're not getting off that easy tonight. Pyrophoric fire may have already occurred at Unit 4 spent fuel plant, which is decades of reactor cores. The explosion is possibly due to the rods not being covered. And because we had... oh, here we go. We actually got it. So we're almost through it. So this is right after, well, this is several weeks after the event. So Unit 4 is to your left. Now, it's not just the front of it that's destroyed. I got to say that for legal reasons, because there's people out there will say, see, Dana's not showing you the whole... Well, I actually have all four sides in one picture that I usually use, but this was a 190-foot building, folks. And this was a 190-foot building, Reactor 3. These stacks are at 25 sieverts an hour. They were saying they vented before the explosion, but you couldn't vent it. 680 kilometers of the coastline was stripped out. There was no telephone poles left. You got to have external power in that scenario, and you didn't. It was something like 30 million bags in 2017. I went there and counted them personally.
29,999,999, 30 million.
See?
I hired employees that could only stay on the job for 3 minutes before they exceeded their personnel exposure.
That's some sick shit, man. Personal exposure. When you get a dose in 3 minutes that exceeds your personal exposure at a nuclear meltdown, you ain't surviving. You're a dead man walking. And Arnie knows that. Talk about a sadistic creature he turned out to be. Arnie, of course, made the assemblies for the fuel pools, and he was in the stories claiming they're at the pool. Everybody's like, Arnie's such a lovely man. Here was a rare moment from UN. He got beat up for weeks and weeks after, but he's the only one we got actually saying, come on, man.
His name is Mr. Bashkuk Tunjak.
Earlier this morning, the mandate issued a press release on the situation in Fukushima, and this is one of the cases that's mentioned in the report. In the press release, we're urging the Japanese authorities to halt the relocation of children and women of reproductive age to areas of Fukushima that exceed levels of radiation that were considered safe before the nuclear disaster. After the nuclear disaster, the government of Japan raised the acceptable level of exposure from 1 millisievert per year to 20 millisieverts per year. And we're quite concerned, in particular for the health and well-being of children who may be raised or born in Fukushima.
That's 20,000 microsieverts. Consider the microsiever 150 counts per minute. Some kind of sadistic stuff, man. They're telling, no, you're like these Geiger counters. If you expose them to a lot of radiation, you got to send them away, get them recalibrated to the factory. It's not something you got to change out parts because you radiated the Geiger counters. So they became ineffective immediately. Another problem at the site. We got 3 more to get through. Another problem at the site is some of the reactor cores, say Unit 2, for instance, had boiled, or because cooking at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures just cuts down through everything and atomizes aerosols, ionizes and radiates it. But eventually, if it hits the water table anywhere, water expands per liter around 1,200 feet. So it cracked the earth in multiple places, and the steam constantly coming out. The site has actually disappeared multiple times. They had to abandon the site because of lethal radioactive emissions coming out of the ground, out of the actual ground. Let's play that.
Fukushima plants say the ground under the facility is cracking and radioactive steam is escaping through the cracks. The cooling system at the plant failed after the devastating tsunami hit Japan in March, sparking a nuclear crisis. But new evidence suggests that Fukushima reactors were doomed to cripple even before the massive wave reached them. Joining me now via broadcast.
Workers say the ground under the Fukushima plant is cracking, and that radioactive steam is coming up. It was 6 places at 10 sieverts per hour. So, which meant the steam is a lethal dose anywhere on the site. And it means anywhere within a mile of the site. Now, this went on for several years. They abandoned that site multiple times. But you need certain conditions to physically see it, right? And this was the webcam. The whole site disappearing in a visible plume of steam. So the Geiger counters could only measure, these were permanent and stationary Geiger counters, could only measure 10 sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. You're going to die within a week or two from a quick exposure. Wind and solar top 10. I want to touch on this story that came out a few days ago because it's showing up over and over, where they claim that wind and solar top 10% of the global power generation for the first time. And all 39% of all power produced in 2021 was carbon-free, which means less birds, insects, plants. Hydro, carbon-free for the propaganda machine is gas, oil, and coal, right? Is not carbon-free. Everything else has a possibility. Nuclear isn't, because it needs 2 external coal, gas, and oil plants just to work dedicated to it. The big ones, not the small ones, but big ones. Hydro and nuclear projects met just over 1/4 of the world's electricity need, 1/4. So hydro and nuclear and other zero carbon accounted for 85% of all nuclear capacity added. 85%. So nuclear, when you say it like that, suggests that nuclear is the biggest zero carbon power, account for 85% of all new capacity in 2021. 2021, Snyder, who gives the synopsis on nuclear, there was 260 gigawatts of new energy in 291 gigawatts in 2021 came online. It was almost all wind and solar and geothermal and ocean. There was a net nuclear capacity increase in 2020 of 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear, like half a nuclear power plant. Renewables added an estimated 248 gigawatts, which was equal to 300 large nuclear power plants. And by 2026, between 2020 and 2026, they estimate there's going to be 4,800 gigawatts, 5,500 nuclear power plants worth of renewables online. 5,500 altogether in the next counting the last 2 years and the next and this year in the next 3 years, 2026. And there's 440 on the planet. So in a 6-year period, they brought online 10 times more nuclear reactors than the total combined on the planet over 80 years with renewables. And what's happening is they're throttling storage for renewables, because otherwise nuclear is instantly dead duck. It's a dead duck right away. So if you put compressed air where you dig mine shafts and compress low pressure air down there, or pumped hydro like water batteries, where you got 2 reservoirs and you pump water up to the top one with extra energy, and it comes down when you need it, right? And if you use if you use geothermal first and tidal energy, these are 24 hours predictable for thousands of years cycle. And then back that up with wind and solar and storage like pumped hydro, compressed air. There's many other storages, by the way. It's not just pumped hydro and compressed air. Batteries is the last one on the list you want to be using. All the others are cheaper, easier. 2021 was a record year for growth for renewables. They estimated by 2026 the world will have 4,800 gigawatts of renewable capacity. It's 5,500 large nuclear power plants. Looking at small modular reactors that don't exist anywhere, and looking at big reactors that shouldn't exist. They're not supposed to exist because they're disease factories. On top of that, they're surrounded by farms. They're permanent disease factories. Once they release into the atmosphere, it's there for millions of years, looking for victims. And when a forest fire comes along, you liberate it back into the environment on top of that, no matter where it's settled down to. It's evil on a scale that is incomprehensible to the average person, unfortunately. Construction has started on 2 nuclear reactors in America in 1972. It took until 1996, 24 years to complete the first one, and 44 years, 2016, before they got the second one up and running. And they sucked up every nickel out of the economy that they could. This is why you have no infrastructure. The industry is disgusting. 5 reactors started in 2026, but 6 were shut down. But I mean, that's not. Nuclear has become irrelevant yet. So, the Czechia president offers to introduce martial law and use nuclear weapons, the use of nuclear weapons. Because in Ukraine. I mean, come on, right? And the media's, who knows if it's true or not, the media's disgusting, right? Nuclear sub still in dock despite 7 years of repairs. 7 years. That's a nuclear sub, Dana. Yeah, but 7 years. The story's insane. And United Kingdom's got 19 of these decrepit reactors with reactor cores in them tied up at a dock and abandoned. They got no idea how to decommission them whatsoever. Bugs to boost solar energy storage underground and soil batteries. Now, unfortunately, that story, I left the house. When I come back, I forgot and went past it. I got to go back and look it up. Idea is to simulate particulate microorganisms in the soil by using buried electrodes to receive electricity from solar panels. Now they can do it with salt, and cheap salt, any kind of salt at all, really, and get fantastic results. Canada is going to extend Pickering by 2 years. And at the same time, the crazies are calling for refurbishment of a disease factory that's not supposed to be running even today, right? This has had major releases into one of the biggest freshwater lakes on Earth in Ontario, Canada. And so have quite a few other. They had a sodium reactor like the one in Santa Susana that melted down, which, by the way, Santa Susana was equal to 460 Three Mile Islands melting down at the same time worth of radioactive releases. 460. Still melting down. This was an old rocket dime site where they had 1,200 experimental rockets blew up on the site. They had multiple reactors buried on the site. Russia sends 152 millimeter Gaitsing S nuclear protected. Now these can actually shoot nuclear shells. So I was checking to see if they use depleted uranium, right? And when I seen it's capable of firing nuclear projectiles, the 155 millimeters is typically a depleted uranium, DULRAM, depleted uranium, low-level radioactive. But this is stuff that has already gone through a chain reaction. So this is very dangerous stuff for millions and billions of years in some cases. Biological, chemical, nuclear protection, just genocide machines. Stupid military. New request issued to manage and operate Canadian nuclear laboratories. Speaking of stupid, Canada's always leading the charge for some reason. Ottawa-based Crown Corporation, the Atomic Energy Canada Limited, has published a request for expressions of interest. Well, ain't they fancy? To manage and operate one of the biggest disease factories on the planet, the site of the first nuclear meltdown on the planet, and no checks and balances on top of that. And not only that, they also hemorrhage, since 1955, radiation into the Great Lakes. The industry, no matter where you look at it, from what angle you look at it, it's very disappointing industry. The complete betrayal every step. They don't even try. It's not in their vocabulary to try to stop the emissions. And they understand it because they got a huge public relation jackals that are out there all the time. Atomic Energy Canada Limited is a Crown Corporation, which means it's evil as it gets. It's above any kind of accountability, which means it has no incentive not to be evil. Based in the nuclear wasteland at Chalk River National Laboratories, managing radioactive waste. Managing it. Think about that statement. They're managing it. Environmental remediation, which is going to go on for several hundred years. And nuclear decommissioning, which is the majority of what they're trying to do with nuclear decommissioning, instead of trying to contain it for 1 million years, they're trying to recycle it. And not into the industry, but into your door handles and your toys for your children and everything else, and your forks and knives. Supporting the Canadian industry. These people are complete jackals, they're criminals. They got the job. They knew the job existed. That's how they got the job in the first place. Their parents and their great-grandparents and everybody else worked here. It's the biggest, I mean, these places shouldn't exist. They've got so much control now over the Canadian key positions in the government. They've captured the regulatory agencies, the medias, and the universities, and turned the schools now into schools of mass destruction. This is Finland's nuclear plant, I think. Yeah, Finland nuke plant shut down. A minor leak. There's no such thing as a minor leak. You're talking about 1,000 psi, 2,000 psi. A minor leak is a big deal. So is being brittle from neutron bombardment. They're very high pressure reactors. Arizona opinion, don't believe the hype. Nuclear natural gas won't save us. It seems like common sense, the most reliable, affordable source of energy is from the sun, solar power on your roof, in your neighborhood, delivered directly to your home. No pipelines and transmission lines. Yet the Republicans keep trumpeting nuclear and natural gas is the way to transition to renewables. Yeah, it's all of them. It's a total frenzy too. They don't hang around here because they make it pains the conscience. Their arguments don't hold water. Don't hold anything. They're just vicious. But he even falls for the battery storage. I swear to God, man, if I hear somebody actually acknowledging real storage, I'm going to stroke out. Pumped hydro can deliver 100% renewable. But think of that as reservoirs, 2 reservoirs, not pumped hydro like from the sea or a river, but you got 2 reservoirs, you fill them up, and you pump water up with excess energy, and you release it when you need it. Or better to use geothermal as a backup, but you can have pumped for compressed air, not just wind storage, but solar too, right? I know this sounds difficult to the nuclear industry, but you dig a tunnel and you fill it up with air. And you store the heat from the compression, in a salt. You can hold the heat at 500 degrees for 2 weeks. And then when you want to use it, you can use the heat to make it expand quicker. Because battery storage is tossed out, there's so much, people who should know better are starting to regurgitate it. So Australia, the Montebello Islands off Australia, 250 islands, are so radioactive they don't want you to spend more than an hour there. So imagine all the victims over the years that went out there. They should sue the Australian government for decades because of this, letting people go out into that nuclear wasteland. How many children are dying or died because they were out there having picnics, I wonder? It just makes me frightened to death to think about. Australia, of course, has the most cancers per 100,000. Probably got nothing to do with the fact that United Kingdom used to wait for the wind to blow across Australia before they set off their nuclear weapons. And there's 1,800 other illnesses, not just cancer from radiation. Kuwait urges international community to press Israel to join the nuclear weapon treaty. Israel's prophecy is the world will turn on them. So the more evil they are, the more likely their prophecy will come true, won't it? The chosen ones. Nuke cover, former First Sea Lord hails nuclear weapons, ultimate safeguard. Go tell that to everybody in Australia, and go tell that to everybody at Christmas Island, and go tell everybody in Nevada where all these places you detonated nuclear weapons, you dirtbag. Want to know about fusion? We use fusion thermonuclear bombs as fusion, right? It can happen to their first nuclear fusion plant. You can turn it into a fusion bomb. It can be megatons go off. For several decades, it's been touted. Now, they've decades since the 30s or something. And if they try to solve the renewable storage, if they all just stop this nonsense for a year and get the kinks out of storage for renewables, like you say, like by 2020, between 2020 and 2026, 4,800 gigawatts of renewables will come online, which is more energy than all nuclear, gas, oil, and coal combined on the planet. Do you really think the next 6 years is going to be less? Or do you think it's going to be quadruple? Because that's what it's doing every year, right? And it's diving in prices. It's so cheap. You idiot to try. The big thing holding it back is storage. They're pretending that the only thing that could work is batteries. And that's why we can't have a future, because the industry has controlled the narrative. Every time I hear the word fusion, it's so pathetic. Why are you doing this to our planet? We don't need it. The renewables now have demonstrated they can do the job. If they were given the ability or even half a chance, they would have done the job. The constant misinformation about renewables is something else, because we cover it all the time, 5 days a week. The deceit and dishonesty is just inconceivable. One of the big Britain's pension is allegedly going to invest in the nuclear in Britain, fund the nuclear renaissance, so-called, in Britain. Britain doesn't have the manpower. Britain don't build the reactors. France do. France got half their fleets are down. It's posturing. It's meant to drive up the uranium stocks, because that's all it does. It's a vapor idea. We've been doing this for years and years and years. There's a lot of goblins in this industry that over the last 10 years have become vultures. They're just vultures, right? They don't have an industry, any functional new industry anymore. And so they're vultures, preying on hapless investors who invest in uranium stocks for this 3 or 4 day artificial inflation that they pop out every 2 weeks or so for 11 years. And the Globe and Mail in Vancouver, one of the biggest medias in Canada, does it 3 times a week. We've called them out no less than 600 times. Investment opportunity in disgusting nuclear. Yeah, you hit rock bottom when you do stuff like that. NASA nuclear-powered Dragonfly drone set to explore Saturn's largest organic moon, Titan. Well, golly. Just golly. Space-based solar plants more practical than nuclear power. Anything is more practical than nuclear power. If you took 1,000 or 9,000, like in Ukraine's plant, nuclear employees, and put them on a great big treadmill with generators on it. You produce more electricity just walking than the nuke plants will each day. Which what we like to call the hamster generator. Just using nuclear plant employees, make them walk for 8 hours a day on a big treadmill with generators. Way more efficient, cheaper. You don't need 2 gas, oil, and coal plants to make it work. Supporting solar arrays that are illuminated by the sun 99% of the time can generate electricity day or night regardless if there's no wind and no sun. I'm so sick of that pointless argument. But if you keep saying it over and over, then you can confuse a good portion of the masses. FBI feared Marilyn Monroe would leak the nuclear secrets that she picked up from JFK just a couple of weeks before her death. Is it possible that the FBI used that as a catalyst to kill her? Of course it is. You can't get into the FBI unless your family is completely crooked. Got a long history of being scum. Then you get in the FBI. And that's what with no incentive not to be evil, that's what you end up with, right? I put a link to this one below for everybody. You can just click on the link and go to that. That's a great story. So I'm troubled by the loose talk about launching a nuclear attack on the Ruskies. The U.S. could have achieved peace by simply pressing Ukraine to implement the 2014 Minsk peace agreement, which it had signed, establishing a framework for setting outstanding issues peacefully. Ukraine promised to implement the Minsk agreement, but chose instead to make war on Donbass for the next 7 years. Ukraine's attack killed 14,000 people before Russia entered the war. There would have been no war had we not overthrown the democratically elected government of Ukraine by violently ousting the president in 2014. And we promoted war by flooding Ukraine with massive arms shipments from NATO afterwards. NATO, of course, was created because of the Soviet Union, so it should have been dissolved immediately when the Soviet Union collapsed. Within 2 months after Russia crossed into Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine were finalizing a draft peace agreement. However, Prime Minister Boris the Monster Johnson suddenly flew to Kyiv to block its implementation, undoubtedly coordinated with the U.S. State Department beforehand. War would continue, regardless of the parties longing for peace. NATO had ample opportunity for peace. NATO's not supposed to exist. It was supposed to be dissolved when the Soviet Union canceled everybody's pensions. And the U.S. realized that with Russia back to the wall, it would have no choice but to attack. And in 2007, the U.S. ambassador to Russia, Burns, pointedly warned that movement towards absorbing Ukraine into NATO might well trigger a war with Ukraine and Russia. Nonetheless, the Obama administration overthrew the Ukrainian president and flooded in weapons, knowing that doing so would trigger a war. I want you to think about that statement. Doing so would trigger a war. I'll play a 1-minute clip from you from Patrick Clausen from the Washington Institute, suggesting how we get into wars. Anytime you're ready, Patrick, where are you to? You're not usually very hard to find.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
So it's pretty hard to see how this president can get us to war with Iran. It'd be best if somebody else starts the war. So lime water. We ordered gas pump yesterday for the boat. I went out and checked it yesterday morning, and that's what it is. So that's the good news. The brake pads showed up today. I'll get them on Thursday, I guess. I get a chance. EDF seeks to postpone the closure of 2 UK nuke plants beyond 2024. Because these plants should never be extended because they get brittle, right? And the more brittle they are, the more easier it is for radiation, neutrons, and everything else, gamma shine, and X-rays to leave the facility. It's much more the longer you run it, the more dangerous the emitters are. They're already 1 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Next generation nuclear power, a furphy. It's a dud. That's an interesting statement. It came out because you remember the statement from Australia yesterday from multiple senators. Next generation nuclear power is a furphy. Small scale nuclear power for Australia remote mining sites. Small scale. It doesn't, and they acknowledge it doesn't exist. Sweeney does. We've covered Dave Sweeney. He does a fairly good job at rallying against the industry. He's one of the few out there he's not 100% up on Fukushima. I've never heard him acknowledge Fukushima's reactors 4 was being faked. And so that's an incredible statement. That's the West Australians, the popular media in Australia. North Korea launched a missile over the Sea of Japan. And Japan comes out and says no impact on nuclear plants in Tohoku, Hokkaido, or Fukushima Prefecture. And that's meant to invoke fear, right, in the population by doing that on both sides, right? Unproven small nuclear reactors would raise, well, you got to think about the crimes Japan committed against North Korea in the 50s. Or, I'm sorry, pre-50. Because Japan basically ruled North Korea before UN went in and flattened it and burnt every community to the ground with napalm, right? Japan had enslaved most of North Korea. So when they pulled out, just before United Kingdom showed up, which was supposed to be a police action that left millions dead, millions missing, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans, and there's still land, sea, air embargoes or 70 years later by no other than 195 militaries. Eisenhower calls them the military-industrial complex. That's United Nations. George Bush calls them the New World Order, right? Unproven small, so you got the New World Order and the military-industrial complex, two keystone parts of the puzzle are both United Nations. It's like UN and UNSCR and ERPA and IAEA. They're all UN. Unproven small nuclear reactors would raise energy costs and delay renewable uptake. It's Australia Conservation Foundation. Floating, they're calling this two small modular reactors. You see that container ship over there in the corner? It's almost the same height. It's almost 500 feet long and 100 feet wide. That's going to fit in the back of a transport truck, I bet. They say it's 33 feet high, but look at it. It's absurd to suggest it's 33 feet high. Wikipedia is disgusting anyway. Next generation small nuclear reactors being advocated by the coalition would raise electricity prices, slow the uptake of renewables, introduce new risks from nuclear waste, because it's 35 times more harmful intermediate level waste, 30 times more high level waste, and 5 times more fuel rods produced in the fabled, papered, small modular reactors. 50 years with this same promise. And they got so much control of the media now, it's revolting. You can't hardly go. There's not a single day we don't have to come out and challenge it multiple times. Not a single day. No rest for the beaten. Poland starts handing out anti-radiation tablets. There's quite a few places handing out radiation tablets down there. Potassium iodine. The only person buried under Reactor 4 from Chernobyl. So, we got a poll tonight. Is Chernobyl worse than Fukushima? Somebody actually said yes. What the hell? Must have been an accident. You too, Dana. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. Is Chernobyl a single reactor worse than Fukushima's 4 reactors that melted down in 8 fuel pools? And I showed you at the very beginning that there's no maybes that they're gone. They're completely gone. This 4 decades of inventories, reactor cores are gone. Why would you store it at the top of the building? Literally, truly the stupidest thing imaginable if you were honest. The most brilliant if you're scum. The only person buried under Reactor 4 from Chernobyl. Making the corpse extremely radioactive. He died trying to save another guy. So, Fukushima reactors, we had a poll, was it last night, night before? Should Toshiba, General Electric, and Hitachi be trying to resolve Fukushima instead of TEPCO? Not yet, and they're evil beyond any kind of comprehension. And if you look at the faking of Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, where they used Toshiba and Hitachi name, that tells the story, right? But if you used a company, we wouldn't be in the state, quite the state that we are. We'd still be in hell, but we wouldn't be in the same hell that we are now. TEPCO is not a decommissioning authority. They have no rights to be on the site once it melted down. You know, nuclear power receives record national support, at the 66th IAEA General Conference. What the frig does that mean? Because the IAEA, all they do is promote nuclear. They're not a regulatory agency. They're a corporation, a subsidiary company of this disgusting UN. And so when they have their 66th General Conference, am I supposed to be surprised that they had record support for a dying industry? Everything you've seen is emblematic of posturing for a dying industry. They're all trying to keep their jobs, right? But nobody else will put out the headlines so they did, because that's how pathetic they actually are. Look at all the bootlicking, cheerleading lapdogs. All zombies, actual real-life zombies. They know they're evil, but that's the job. They went to school to get the job, every one of them there. We can be evil together. That's the motto. These nuclear bros say they know how to solve climate change. And if I put the word climate change in my description, I'll always take the E off change, so climate change. Otherwise, I get a big banner under my video after saying United Nations, come over to my site and we'll explain to you. It's despicable, really. It's an invasion of it's like being assaulted. Meet the internet subculture obsessed with nuclear power and proud of it. These are borderline human, you know that, right? The typical nuclear bro. Now, I know you're groaning and say, come on, Dana, don't do that to us. I had to sit there and go through it twice myself. You should suffer it at least once. Typical nuclear bro is lurking in the comment sections of clean energy YouTube videos. I don't really hang around my site that much. I get them brainwashed pretty quick around here. Believe 100% of the world's electricity should come from nuclear power plants. Now, they don't believe that. That's their job, to come out and promote that narrative, right? There's something like 1,000 of these companies. That's all they do is promote nuclear. They'll write articles for every story that you read about nuclear is written by the nuclear bros of the industry. The media gets an email with the story, say, put your author's name on it, and we'll give you $200 or $500, or if it's New York Times, we'll give you $5,000 or whatever, right? But it's written by the lobbying groups. It's not written by, because we know this because it's such a complicated subject. And it's impossible for anybody even trying hard to happen upon the topic and sort it out the way that they're able to do it. And know the nuances, not to say Reactor 4 melted down, or to make sure and say that Chernobyl is worse than Fukushima. And there's a whole list of these things that if you write an article, you have to hit all these checklists or it doesn't get published because we don't see anything different. That's the only thing that makes sense. It includes grassroots organizers. Grassroots organizers. Grassroots is not Bill Gates and Elon Musk. But they just try to make it that way, right? And famous techno-optimists like Bill Gates and Elon Musk. First of all, Bill Gates doesn't sit at Terra Power. He doesn't go there and walk around, shake hands either. But they use those two names so many times. That's their idols. Because they don't actually have their own frontmen, right? They don't have anybody in the nuclear industry that people can relate to. Like people say, yeah, they're a pretty cool guy. I wouldn't mind hearing what he got to say again. No. And Bill Gates and Elon Musk will only come out with a cardboard. They'll read what's under a piece of cardboard. The media will regurgitate it 500 times. And they get to pat themselves on the back that it's basically they have to come out and get on one knee and kiss the ring of the nuclear industry once in a while. Have to bow down at the front of the nuclear industry to keep their status. And they are uniformly convinced that the world is sleeping on nuclear energy. Meet the fans of nuclear power. Rod Adams, Geraldine Thomas, Robert Gale, Geraldine Thomas. Meet the scum of nuclear power. Nuclear advocates often meet each other on the internet. Creepy as frig, eh? On large shared WhatsApp groups. Sharing scum news on Reddit or Twitter. It's also on the internet that they have earned the moniker Nuclear Bro. I've never heard the term tell that story. And I do a show 5 days a week, typically. Week after week, month after month, year after year. I've never heard it. And I do a 24-hour news cycle on top of that. Never heard it before. Nuclear Bro. This is from the Scumbag Washington Post. So that's their moniker, is to come out and be goblins. Young, white, millennium men with a singular focus on splitting atoms. Honest to goodness. Whoever wrote this is at the heap of pathetic, at the very top of pathetic. The criticisms that these types of bros, mansplains, refuse to accept other arguments. Many pro-nuclear, you can't be a pro-nuclear activist. A pro-evil activist, but you can't be a pro-nuclear activist. They call somebody pro-nuclear an activist. If you go look up the book on grammar, it doesn't exist. That the label is misplaced. It's not misplaced. They say the movement is a diverse group of scum and women scum who come to the nuclear energy due to the fear of climate change. That's what they're trying to do, right? If this was true, I would know about Nuclear Bro by now. Kiefer, a 40-year-old emergency medical physician who lives in Toronto, we covered this piece of shit many times, has always been on the political left. After his son was born in 2018, 2018, folks, he began to read more about climate change. Put his scientific training as a doctor to work, reading research about the energy transition and trying to understand how to power the economy without emitting billions of tons of carbon dioxide. Well, it doesn't travel very far from coal, oil, and gas plants, right? Nuclear is the one that travels right around the entire planet. It's hopelessly evil. That's the nuclear industry. The only way you can describe it is perpetual evil. All these years, we've never seen them anything but evil. We've never seen them rational. We've never heard tell of a rational nuclear conversation, nuclear story. We've never read a story from the nuclear industry where they're actually honest about even a single facet. This is NOAA's radioactive fallout model based on venting, but you couldn't vent because there's no infrastructure. It's not based on the inventory that I showed you at the beginning. So it would be hundreds of millions of times worse than what you're looking at. This is radioactive fallout. This is the first 40 days. They're suggesting it doesn't mix with the southern hemisphere. It's completely dishonest. It's completely disingenuous. That's what they do. They're dishonest, disingenuous, deceitful, deceptive. Think about this statement right here. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time. Does that sound like local fallout to somebody? I think it's stunning how actually evil these people are. I'm not going to be able to suffer through it because there's too much there. I got it more for records, my own records, than... Because if you tried... Here's the sad and horrific part of the story. If I try, and I did Sunday and Monday, if I try to cover every lie in each story, we can't get very many stories covered. And it's a constant. It's a constant lies. I've never dreamt in history that any industry can exist like that. And the lies are coming from the medias. All of them, worldwide. If that doesn't frighten the living daylights out of you, what the hell does? That doesn't worry you. That doesn't keep you up at night. What the hell does? That all your media work really hard every day to stab you in the back with perpetual lies. It's just a matter of time before they give all the school children Spider-Man suits and Hulk backpacks and pillowcases, just to make sure they can't escape the brainwashing. Nuclear powering vehicles. So Ukraine says after the war is over, we're going to put up a whole bunch of electrical pumps. They're going to be powered by nuclear power. This is the ultimate weirdo public relation I've ever heard tell of. Their country, half the people have been forced out of the country. And their future, when the war is over, they're going to have all these free recharging stations. It's going to be a utopia. There's the nuclear industry, right? Trying to repair the damage from the plant being held captive for 6 months, 7 months. Because the big push on nuclear is got a lot to do with the nuclear industry in Ukraine. The public relations are... There's nothing they won't say. They'll dress it up and stick it out there and pat themselves on the back, collect their paycheck from the IAEA. Mark Carney says net zero impossible without nuclear power, which is Brookfield's, if I remember correctly. No transition that works without nuclear. Really, Mark? Net zero economy. Net zero will be impossible without wider adoption of the disease factory known. So this was Toronto-based Brookfield, brought nuclear power Westinghouse when it went bankrupt in 2018, right? As a bankruptcy reorganization. And Brookfield is running a sales process for Westinghouse that generated robust interest from buyers. So Mark Carney works for Brookfield. So when he's trying to sell nuclear to somebody and get rid of it, so he comes out and says that net zero is impossible. In the Financial Post, folks, is impossible without nuclear power. It's so easy to lose faith in humanity, because you can't fix this without some kind of serious penalties involved, see? There's no incentive for them to stop being evil. They're so used to being evil, and there's no restrictions on being evil with the media and nuclear. And evil being just brutal, deceptive, deceitful, dishonest lies. They have there's zero reasons. There's no one going to penalize them. They'll get promotions. They'll get raises. They'll get bonuses. The more evil they are, the more money gets thrown at them. He's booking for a job at the White House, no doubt. Safety, waste storage, and promising tech. How the facts about nuclear energy have changed since you last made up your mind. Fortune magazine. Right? So there's all the biggest medias in the world. And they got a full-time job is lying to everybody. Is manipulating everybody into complacency. I gotta die, hang on. Oh man, that's bad. That's bad, baby. That's pretty good. We made it that far before I lost a lung. Climate change, the energy crisis revived the nuclear energy debate. No. Even though that's one of my favorite pictures this week for sure. EU said nuclear was renewable. This is the farthest thing from reality. Now if people invest in nuclear in the EU, they'll get a tax break. And that still won't save it. There's nothing you can save nuclear or us. Nuclear industry has already sentenced us all to death, but they already sentenced themselves to death. And each year their lies are getting worse, more prolific. The Department of Energy, they're so pro-nuclear, they refuse to acknowledge nuclear has any issues. No, it's got no issues. Nothing. No, nothing. No, everything's perfect. You can't fix something if you don't admit you got an issue. Nuclear energy programs tread water in a stopgap bucket to start fiscal year 2023. Again, tread water is right. That's all they can do is tread water. They can have anything they want to fix the problem. Look at Hanford. They get everything they ever wanted. KBR to expand UK nuclear energy support on a nuclear waste service contract. There's another story from Sellafield. The UK nuclear waste services, that's got to be the biggest flop in the entire industry, isn't it? And the only thing they come up with is to try to hire any company they can find stupid enough to come out and work with them. They can't even build their own reactors, for goodness sakes, in the United Kingdom. They got 60 years of just... the record of United Kingdom is, oh my God. Like, really. What they done to the population down there... Bad teeth are, if you live close to a nuclear plant, you got bad teeth. If you live within 100 miles of a nuke plant and you got bad teeth, it's because you're within 100 miles of a nuclear plant. Or because you're eating food from the farms surrounding the nuclear plants. you actually can't, I can't keep up with it. I can read it each day. I can come out and just shake my head for a couple of hours. And because tomorrow, but by the time tomorrow comes, I'm going to have the same load of just what, man? I'll have polls where I say, should the people in the nuclear industry really be allowed to have children? It's obvious they're not fit to have a pet hamster, let alone an actual child. Nobel Prize season arrives amid a war, nuclear fear, hunger. You forgot propaganda from the nuclear industry polluting the entire planet. And the Nobel Prize, the secretive Nobel Committee, who gave the Nobel Prizes to all kinds of war criminals on top of that. Obama got one by just showing up at the White House. Oh. Norwegian, Nobel Prize, Swedish, are 5 separate prizes that, according to Alfred Nobel's will of 1895, which was co-opted by the industry, right? That's the problem with a foundation, is you lose control of the foundation at some point. The industry is going to gobble it up. They're going to send in their brightest and best to gobble it up, get them out of the way and bring in the goblins. To those who, during the preceding years, have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind, and were first awarded in 1901. To the people that done the most or best to advance a fellowship among nations, the abolition and reduction of standing armies, and the establishment and promotion of peace. In some cases, the winners have not lived out the values enshrined in the Peace Prize. Just this week, the Vatican acknowledged imposing disciplinary sanctions on Nobel Prize peace-winning bishop following allegations he sexually abused boys in East Timor. Kids, you mean? Children. Not boys, but children. In 2018, the award was postponed after sex abuse allegations rocked the Swedish Academy, which names the Nobel Prize Literature Committee itself, and sparked an exodus of members. It revamped itself and faced more criticism. In 2019, Literature Award to Austria's Peter Handke, who've been called an apologist for the Serbian war crimes. Sad, isn't it? And totally co-opted, right? And gets a cash award of a US $900,000, almost $1 million. I can wreck the nuclear industry with $1 million. Government wants command center in case of a nuclear event in Sweden. Because they just joined NATO. Well, they're not quite there yet, but there's Sweden and Finland will be the 31st, 32nd NATO countries. So NATO's going to have to change their Wikipedia page to 32 militaries, not 30. How can Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant stay open? They had, in 2012, they had a radioactive release that some were saying was almost as big as Fukushima in, say, just tritium. But if you got a release that big in tritium isotopes into the ocean, you can't do that without all the other. They don't have the ability to filter it, despite what Fukushima TEPCO claims. TEPCO is not supposed to exist. It went bankrupt. It was nationalized in 2011 right away. And Ernest J. Mantz He was the science czar, wasn't he? The 30th anniversary U.S. explosive nuclear testing moratorium. Idiots. Well, there were approximately 2,000 explosive nuclear tests worldwide. They're bombs. That's detonations. That's nuclear weapons. It's the same one they're going to use in war. The radioactive fallout is the same. It doesn't matter if you've done it in a test. The Australia was a test. You still can't go there 70 years later in the Montebello Islands. Well, like 2,000 explosive nuclear tests worldwide. One of them, the Soviet Union, was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki's, because it was a plutonium bomb, right? It's equal to 3,800 Nagasaki's worth of radioactive fallout. Bravo Castle from Americans was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki's worth of radiation at the same time. These are absurd numbers. So when you start looking at the megatons and stuff like that, it's because, like, you know, one of them they're talking about is Hiroshima, which is like a 14 kiloton, and Nagasaki was a 16 kiloton. But the Castle Bravo was 1,000 kilotons. So, like, you have to level it out. It's completely dishonest. It's a nuclear war. With 500 conducted above the ground or underwater. Anything underwater was the sulfur peroxide hydrogen. These are terrible hot particles. This is an incredible phenomenon released into the environment. Ones that are underground all vented because they cracked the earth open, every one of them. There wasn't a single one that didn't vent. Suggesting that they were underground is not being honest. Devastation the test brought for indigenous communities, downrivers, everybody's downwinders. Atomic veterans and so many others will never be quantified. And a ban on testing is not yet codified in the international law. White House, no indication of imminent Russia use of a nuclear weapon. Keep the fear going, right? Ukraine's ascension to NATO under new circumstances allows our partners not to repeat mistakes since 2008. Like, why would you... Well, first off, NATO is supplying the weapons to Ukraine, right? So that'll be... If they get in, now NATO has to defend them. With their machines, their submarines, their fighter jets and everything else, and their pilots. Putin illegally annexes part of the Ukraine and defies international law. The next day they took it back, apparently. EU demands clampdown on issuing visas to Russian citizens. You can't blame the Russian citizens. Frogs in Chernobyl become darker to better tolerate the radiation, study claims. You can't say fines. You can't prove that. Study claims. Well, maybe they turn black because they're irradiated in the nuclear wasteland. Did that ever occur to anybody? Probably not. Allows them to better tolerate the radiation. Dark skin, doesn't matter what color your skin is. It's like saying black people can go into Fukushima because they can tolerate the radiation better. What kind of idiotic freaking statement is that? I'm ashamed of the universities, the schools of mass destruction. Campaigners, right? You're a campaigner or an environmentalist if you criticize nuclear. You know that, right? You're not a person. You're not intelligent. You're a campaigner or an environmentalist. Both of those names means the police are supposed to hit you in the head and take you to the jail. You're not a human. You're a campaigner or an environmentalist. Bless their hearts for getting out there and doing that. We absolutely adore these people that do that. Nuclear disarmament movement needed, says council boss. Nuclear disarmament movement. Nuclear power plant movement, disarmament movement is what you need. Moon base may be powered by uranium balls. Yes, because that's about the only people that got balls left on the planet, except for a handful that hangs around here. How come they haven't gone back to the moon in 45 years? You know, Elon Musk wears the t-shirt that says Occupy Mars, but not Occupy the Moon. Wouldn't you transition to the moon first and then go to Mars? Nothing makes sense anymore, right? Chernobyl and Reactor 4 in Fukushima. I can't tell the difference. I absolutely can't tell the difference. What's the difference? What's the difference? Well, it's my birthday in about half an hour. No show tomorrow night. I have never taken a birthday off. I'm not getting any younger. I'm pretty happy we got the fuel pump ordered for the boat. We figured it out. I figured it out. We don't need no stupid shops around here. It's kind of weird for me to take a day off. I don't like the idea, but the last couple of days have been appealing to me. Actually, 60 years old tomorrow. 60 years young tomorrow. That's a big birthday for anybody, right? A lot of stress hitting the big 6-0. And the flu, I just had Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 4.5 days straight brutal flu. I got up every hour last night and go and try to throw up with the flu, but this afternoon was a pretty good afternoon. Not perfect, but it was pretty good. It wasn't like last couple of days. And then the night is actually pretty good again. I'm talking for an hour and a half. My throat's going to be hurting anyway. And I took all sugar and increments out of my diet. And today I got rid of anything else in the building here. So there's no more sugar in my diet. And no more bread. And no more potatoes in my diet. Get rid of the starch and the sugar, right? And then your body starts burning better maintenance for your body, right? So that's kind of that made me feel good today to get to that stage. I had to wean myself off everything for the last 4 weeks or so, and so I'm really happy about that. I feel a big difference in my health too, right? And so over next year, I think I'll get back to my normal, hopefully. I gotta preserve myself because this is a big fight we're in. And it's been a tough year, right? A really bad year. Yeah, they took down my site last year, and that killed me. And I had no strikes or nothing like that. We were looking for spiders. The spiders are gone. It's our third year on the East Coast, 6 years on the West Coast doing research expeditions for Fukushima, 4 to 5 months at a time on the ocean. That kind of took the good out of me. I don't feel I recovered from that. That was incredibly difficult. And it was worth it. We got the documentation. To our horror, it's an extinction event. And so you can see it up on my site, thenuclearproctologist.org. When you scroll down, you'll see the before and after pictures. It's just stunning. And I've showed up pictures several thousand times now on these programs. And it still shocks me. It horrifies me. It haunts me. It still haunts me constantly. Obviously, or I wouldn't be here, right? And it's quite the struggle to keep everything functional and keep myself functional. I'm pretty good. But to keep the whole operation just running is a disaster. It's not for lack of will or lack of trying, right? It's just that's the cards I'm dealt, and I got to deal with it and make the best of it and do what I can. And I can't, despite the fact that I want to do everything, I can't. Despite the fact that I'm good to go, I have the ability to curb stomp this industry. I just can't seem to get it to work for me. Oh, we got James is calling it in. Hang on, James, I'm almost with you. Where are you to? Hey, no, I got the audio turned down. Hang on. Let me turn you up. Try that again. Oh, thank you. I can't hear you. Try it again there. I got you this time.
Did you hear me okay?
I got you on the speakerphone. My apologies. Caught me off guard that time. I heard.
I wanted to wish you a happy birthday, Dana. That's all.
Oh, I heard the Mr. Dana, but I never had the speaker on.
Yeah, I was trying to mimic that guy. I was hoping he'd call it. That's not the bitch.
That was so.
Oh, God.
I blocked him last night because enough of him. Right, that was too much.
I recorded I recorded a bunch of his samples, and it's funny because I did a track I uploaded on SoundCloud, and I got this guy from Japan listening. And because I'm like, whoever threatened Dana tonight, this is for you.
So awesome, man! Thank you.
Apparently, these guys they got a long reach, But I copied the town he's from. He's like right outside of Tokyo, so.
Yeah, he was something, man. Over the years, he's like, wow. My apology. There you go. It's that way I stop. My throat is gone.
They're afraid. You got the high road, Dana. Everyone knows that the world knows you're on the high road. We all love you.
Thank you, my friend. Yeah, I love you too, my friend. God bless you. Thank you.
And just try to take care of yourself, okay?
Done deal.
So
Square deal.
All right. Good night, Dana. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, James. That was James Lucifer. Anybody's not familiar, he's in the comments section. Thanks, James. James always got the great little chirps he puts in there because he's thinking, right? And so you'll get these little three words, 5 words, or 1 sentence. It's awesome. Because it's thoughtful, right? My throat is just shot. I'm just going to give up, and I'll take tomorrow off, which is going to be really hard. I'm not going to grab any stories. I might go to Fukushima, but I'm not going to do any amount of work. I'm just going to have a day. Just I guess, do nothing. I just have a day of doing nothing and just not worrying about anything. Watch something stupid on movies maybe or something. Maybe go and try to treat myself to something. Who knows? I don't. I like what I do, right? I really. I understand that somebody has to do what I'm doing. And it's better that somebody like me, anyway, is out there. Because I bring a lot of documentation to the conversation when it's there. And so that was awesome. Appreciated. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. I'm sorry. Thursday night show, which is the last show of the week. Yeah, my throat is just brutal at this stage. That's fine. We made it. I'll take care of it. I got some lemon out there. I'll put in another glass. This is full of lemon water with just like chunks of lemon. I went out and bought a big bag of them today because it's good for the acidic. I've been neglecting it and I forgot. And then it struck me, hey, I better go get some avocados and lemons and a bunch of vegetables. And probably the best meal I had today for a long time, too. We'll see everybody on not tomorrow night, but the next night, Thursday night. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. I'm going to close the poll right here before I forget. And I've forgotten before. Is Chernobyl a single reactor worse than Fukushima's 4 nuclear meltdowns and 8 fuel pool meltdowns? And we have a resounding 95% of the people acknowledges that Fukushima is infinitely worse, despite what the media is trying to convince you. I'll come in and I will read the comments here later, and I'll get those birthday wishes you put there. Thank you. I see some of them. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. We'll see everybody in just one day more. And have a great night, a great day tomorrow.